Yo, what's up, nerds? It's MTG Man, and yeah, I'm back with a fucking Sharpie Cube that I've been building. First off, I guess I should start with a funny card because people like funny cards. So right here we have Remove Soul. I'm not gonna say anything. I'm gonna let you look at it. That's the funny card. All right, yeah, you happy now? And let's get on with like the actual cards. So like I mentioned, I just bought like a box of bulk, and I've just been going through it and sharpening out cards and trying to make it interesting. Um, I'm making it very removal heavy, very discard heavy, because there's also a lot of like really strong creatures. But it's also very draw heavy. So you're gonna be like getting cards consistently, and they're gonna get removed consistently. So first up is he, her. So you pay 2 and a green, you tap it, and you search your library for a card named RE and put it into play, then shuffle. Here's an interesting thing you can do. So I hear you saying, what card is named RE? Well, RE are pretty common letters. So like we have RE. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, it deals 1 damage to that player. I need to like get rid of the name in the text box, but I just didn't get to that yet. And then you can pay 1 to destroy an artifact or enchantment, and it deals 2 damage to that permanent's controller. So you can give RE multiple different like cards. So RE, when it comes into play, you search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard, and then shuffle. And then you can pay 3 and a green, return this card from graveyard to play, it gains haste. Or RE, spells you cast cost 2 less to play. Just a general cost reducer, it's going to speed up the game. RE, devoid, so it has no color. When it deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles his or her library, and when it dies, you draw a card. RE, when it enters, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle, and it gets +1/+0 for each permanent you control. So here we have RE being a 1/1 win con that's going to exile their library if they can't block. It's a bear spirit that searches your library for a card, or it can just be a really good swinger. RE can be a cost reducer. RE can be a way to get things into your graveyard, or RE can just be a general burn source. So it just gives you different ways to play with the same cards. Next up is Age Owl. When it comes into play, look at the cards of your library and put them back in any order. So yes, it does take a lot of time to reorder your library. I think since I'm playing this with friends, we'll probably put some sort of time limit on that. That'll be like rule zeroed. But you know, a 1 or a 2 mana 1/1 flyer that reorders your library is pretty good. However, there's also ways for your opponent to like disrupt that and whatever. Next up is Come Fire. Come Fire deals 4 damage to target non-creature and 7 damage to target creature. So for 5 mana, it's one of the weaker removal spells, but hitting something for 7 is pretty good, and then it's also probably going to hit either something like a planeswalker, or it's going to hit an opponent for 4, so it just gives you options. Next up is Quirm. I thought Quirm was funny. So you return to your battlefield any number of permanent cards in your graveyard. So for 3 mana, as long as you have things in your graveyard, it's going to be a good option. You know, it's a perfect card to go along with Re, where Re can just put cards into your graveyard. Next up is Goblin E. So Goblin E gets +2/+0 for each goblin. Basically, instead of originally got +2/+0 for each equipment attached to it, now it's goblins. So we have a little bit of a goblin synergy, and there's a handful of goblins in my Sharpie Cube. So Try gives target creature +3/+100. Basically, they're not dying to damage. That's all you need to know. Calc is just counter target spell, draw a card. Sure, it's kind of boring, but every set needs some sort of counter spell, even if it's bad. Which in this case, a 1 and a blue counter any spell and draw a card, pretty good. Would probably be a staple if it was ever printed as like an actual card. Froth. So Froth just taps 2 target creatures and they don't untap. There are cards back in, I want to say Portal 3 Kingdoms, where they didn't have the until end of turn, So like their stat bumps and giving things horsemanship were just permanent. So that's how we're playing it. If there's no until end of turn, it's permanent. It's a permanent stat buff. Next up is Ache. So it's just destroy X target lands. It's not fun, all right, but you need to put a good amount of mana into it, so that makes it pretty balanced. Next up is Tet of Fire. So you sacrifice a creature, enchanted creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn, and then creatures you control get +2/+0. Basically, this is how, so you full swing, anything that gets blocked, you sacrifice in order to bump up whatever creature didn't get blocked that was equipped. Or if it was blocked, then you're fucked, but like, whatever. Next up is Cope. So Cope counters a spell and exiles it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. It only costs a blue because there's no reason to pay anything for X. Next up is Bio-Elf. When it's put into the graveyard, put 2 green insects into play. They're 1/1s. Very basic, but if you notice, that's not from the battlefield, right? So, yeah, you could use RE to put it into the graveyard to create 2 insects. It's just little things that can interact together. Next up is Liliana's Stew. So it's a black 1/2. You can tap to make an opponent discard a card. This is going to really hurt your opponent's hand size. And sure, this isn't a big threat. It's not going to swing in and kill them. It's not going to deal a shit ton of damage. But basically, once they get to 0 cards in hand, that's it. Because you can just make them discard it. And unless they can play that card in response, they're fucked. Thirst for Men is draw 3 cards, then 2 cards. So it's a draw 5 for 3 mana. Like I said, the draw power is pretty consistently high. And that helps blue keep up with other colors because, green has some incredibly strong, creatures that are going to be attacking in, Lurgoyf, Pughammer, whatever. Green has big creatures. Red has just a lot of good consistency options. Blue doesn't really have anything to win the game with besides drawing. So that's one of your main consistency things is you just keep drawing. Oatnap, you gain control of target creature. Why the fuck did I leave until end of turn on there? Silly me. Okay, so you gain control of target creature, untap that creature, it gains haste, and it gets +3/+0. So this may not be as good as other, steel creature spells, but it's still going to get haste. It's still going to get +3/+0. And for 3 mana, you're stealing whatever your opponent's biggest threat is. So it's just good options. Mental. So you exile an instant or sorcery and put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. This includes your opponent's instants and sorceries. So it kind of just stops them from playing spells until they find a way to get rid of it. Sis. So when you cast Sis, you gain X life and draw X cards. Has flying, trample, and enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. I just think every set's better with a Hydra. So yeah. I thought I could do something similar like RE. So I just kind of called this O and left it open. But you reveal the top 5 cards of your library and put them into your hand. Sure. It's a draw 5 for 3. That's really good. But your opponent also knows what's in your hand then. Next up is blue. So you prevent all damage against you in a turn. Sure, you have to pay 1 mana, but until your opponent can get rid of it, combat damage isn't really a good way to win. Next up is Dis. Counter target spell, draw a card. 1 blue mana. Sure, it's just completely better than the other counter spell, but I kind of want to keep each card as a one-of because I think that's more fun. So having Calc and Dis in the same set is fine because then you have 2 counter spells without just having 2 Disses. Rousing Red. When it enters, you draw 2 cards, and enchanted creature has +1/+1 and flying. So it's just a better divination to some extent. It's more just here because I wanted to put some enchantments in the set because I think a set should be diverse in the cards in it. Strong Log, so you pay blue and tap it to counter target spell. Being able to counter one spell every turn, not for free, but for 2 blue mana without having to like discard a card or anything, is pretty strong. Whisper of the Wills, so you tap it, add green. So within a turn, it already pays for itself, and it has Storm. You'll notice in flavor text, Storm comes up a lot, so you might as well just give things Storm. Kapo Vorak. I just thought it sounded funny, just Kapo Vorak. But it gets +1/+1 for each permanent your opponents control. Sure, that could only be like, oh, they have 5 lands, but that's still like a 7/7 for 5. It's whatever. It could. I feel like you could also switch it to each permanent you control, but it's really hard to tell if you're going to have more permanents or if your opponent's going to have more permanents. Next up is Brokey. So Brokey has base power and toughness 5/5. It's just a 5/5 for 1 mana. That's really strong. Cow of Suspicion gives enchanted creature +2 +2/-1, and then enchanted creatures and other creatures that share a creature type with it get +2/+0. It's a little bit scuffed. I went over the plus sign a little bit, but yeah, it's +2/+0. So it gives the enchanted creature +4 +4/-1, and the -1 hurts, but like it's dealable. Unfortunately, if you put this on like a human and your opponent also has humans, they're fucked. Or well, their humans are also pumped up. You're fucked. Row of Vigor. So enchanted creature gets +1/+1, and enchanted creature and other creatures that share a type with it get +1/+1. Same thing as Cow of Suspicion, just green and different stats. Hunt for Seaman. You create a you create a 1/1 black and green pest with when this creature dies, you gain 1 life. And then you can reveal a card you own from outside the game and put it into your hand, and then draw a card. So it does a lot for 2 mana, right? You could keep something in your sideboard, and then it's more or less protected because this will just be the fill-in for it, because you'll play this, put that into your hand. It's also replacing itself doubly because it draws you a card, and a 1/1 isn't bad. It's never going to hurt to have a 1/1. Here's where we get to, I could not like come up with fun names for all of these. Sure, I could have just called this men discipline, like I don't know. So it's 1 blue, and then you can pay 1 and a blue to draw a card. It also has Delve, so it's really just blue. It's whatever. Like, it's just giving blue more consistent draw options. I think blue is going to be a strong color in my cube because it's going to let you get to all the other crazy shit. So, Ferris Band Thunderhoof. So when you cast a spell, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. It's a 3/4. So it's just going to get out of hand pretty easily. Goblin Champion. So it has haste, and whenever a creature you control attacks, that creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So it's just like a good anthem, I guess. Fountainport Bell. So when it enters, you can search your library for a card, reveal it, then shuffle and put that card on top, and you can pay 1 to draw a card. That's just some pretty consistent, like, you play this turn 1, you find the best card in your deck, you put it on top, and then you can just pay 1 to just draw over and over. It's mental discipline, but better. Which sucks to say, but there's only one of it. So one player is going to get it, and everybody else is fucked. False Demise. Enchanted creature is put into a graveyard, and then return that creature to play under your control. So it dies, and then you get it. It's removal, it steals shit. It's just like a little bit of both. Mind Swords. So it's 1 black. And you can, instead, if you control a swamp, you can sacrifice a creature instead of paying its mana cost. If you do, you just remove 2 cards from the game. This could be hand, graveyard, field. Doesn't matter. You just remove 2 cards from the game. So, it's a pretty strong removal spell. Sure, it's sorcery speed, but it's still good. Fairy Squadron. So you add 3 and a blue as you play this spell, like, to your mana pool. So it's going to ramp you a shit ton. And then when it comes into play, so Fairy Squadron comes into play with 2 +1/+1 counters on it and is flying. So you play this turn 1, right? Now you have a 3/3 flyer, and then you have 3 and a blue in your mana pool to do whatever the fuck you want. It's just gonna help decks go off, because I think fast is fun, but control is also what needs to be happening here. So, yeah. Skull Raid, target opponent discards 2 cards. You draw cards equal to this card's cost. Let me get that R real quick. Okay. So basically, it's a 4 mana, target opponent discards 2, and then you draw 4. It's giving black more options. Misstep, creatures target player controls don't untap during that player's untap step. Doesn't say next, just says during their untap step. So your opponent better make good use of those creatures because they don't untap afterwards. It's extremely powerful, and if you can play that early, your opponent's pretty fucked. Defiant Great Maul. When it enters, put 2 -1/-1 counters on target creature, and whenever you put 1 or more counters on it, you can remove a counter from another target creature you control. So you can just give another opponent's creature -2/-2, maybe kill something, and then you have a 4/5 for 3. Pretty solid. Stormfront Riders. When it enters, return 2 creatures to their owner's hand, and when it or another creature is returned to hand from the battlefield, you create a soldier. So it comes in, you bounce 2 of your opponent's things, you create 2 soldiers. So you put 6 power on the board, remove 2 of their creatures, and sure, they can replay them, but like, you're basically just, you have a commanding board state, that's what I'm saying. Paragon of Modernity. So it gets, it's a 4 mana 2/2 flying, and you can pay 3 to give it +1/+1 until end of turn, and then put a +1/+1 counter on it. I feel like, yeah, you could get rid of the end of turn part so that it just gets +1/+1 forever. Like I said, there are cards that did that in the past, but those are instants and sorceries. And I also feel like counting what's a +1/+1 counter and what's +1/+1 from the ability would get kind of annoying. So you just keep bumping it. That's what you do. If you get lucky and you pull that and Chance of the Tang, where you just reveal it and add green, shit, you use the green to pay for it, and then you bump it up at infinity. I don't care. Like, the cards in this cube have good synergy to an extent. Citadel Wood Readers. So you add 2 and a green as you cast a spell. So it's basically free, and then when it enters, you draw 2 cards. It's a good draw option for green, and it's just free, basically. The Belligerent. So it's a vehicle. When it attacks, you create a treasure token. Until end of turn, you can look at your library, and you can play lands and cast spells from your library. So as long as it attacks, you have access to every card in your library. You can just play whatever you want. It just gives you a lot of options. If you have a really strong land you want to play, there's a really strong land you can play. If you have strong creatures, if you have a win the game option, whatever, it's just going to let you play out your library. Succumb to the Cold. So tap creatures an opponent controls and put a stun counter on each of them. So you just tap their whole board and then put a stun counter on it, and it leaves you pretty free to attack, whatever you want to do. Frantic Inventory. Draw a card, then draw cards equal to the number of cards in your graveyard. So if you have 5 cards in graveyard, it's a 2 mana draw 6. Like I said, blue is going to be insane for draw power. Peer Through Depths. You look at your library, you can reveal a card from among them and put it into your hand, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So it's just a tutor for blue. I think tutoring is, again, really important because you're looking for certain cards to win here. Or it gets you one of your removal options, either or. Searing Light just destroys target creature, white instant, pretty easy. Plummet destroys target creature. I want every color to have some sort of destruction option, so like white, green. If we look, black has like cut down, or blue has sculpt or occult for exiling creatures. I just want every color to have a pretty easy way to get rid of it. And red has like more damage based stuff like lightning bolt and whatever. Next up is Hop Charm. So target creature gains first strike, target player gains 2 life, and you destroy an enchantment. I think enchantment removal is going to be important, especially if you don't get one, you could just be fucked in a matchup. Crow of Fur. So enchanted creature gets +1/+0 and has first strike. Enchanted creature and other creatures that share a creature type with it get +1/+0 and first strike. Just going to bump up your board. Nosy Goblin, you can tap it to destroy a creature. Again, it's just good removal. It's a small creature. It's going to blow up whatever your opponent plays, and they have to answer it, or else it's answering everything else. New, so you gain 6 life, draw a card, gain 2 life. So it's a 3 mana, gain 8 life, draw a card. Not great, but life is kind of important. So, Roots of Wisdom, mill 3, then return a card from your graveyard to your hand, draw a card, mill a card. So you mill 3, get a card back, draw a card, mill a card. So it's just good for graveyard strategies. It's good for draw. It's just giving green more options, and it's going to get something back from your graveyard. Rescue just returns a permanent to its owner's hand. This could be annoying, though. If you think about it, you play an island turn 1, your opponent plays a land, you tap your island, you return it to hand, you've set them back a whole turn. Could be annoying. Laspara Sentinel, it's reach, it's a 1/2, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. It's just good color fixing, and I think mana dorks are important in any environment. Bountiful Landscape, you tap it to add colorless, green, blue, red, and draw a card. So it's adding 7 mana and drawing you cards off of a land. There's only one of those. One player's going to have it, they're probably going to make their game plan searching for it, because 7 mana at any point in the game is fucking insane. Solar Blast deals 3 damage to target creature or player, you draw a card, and then it deals 1 damage to target creature or player. It's not great, but it's just more options, more removal. Resourceful Return, you return a card from your graveyard to your hand, and you draw a card. Just more options. Fencing Ace has Double Strike and Prowess, so whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it'll get +1/+1 until end of turn. If you can storm off somehow, this could be another way for you to win the game. Devout Harpist, so you can tap it to destroy a creature. It's just a better Nosy Goblin, but in white. Leatherback Baloth, it has Storm, it's a 3 mana 4/5, so if you can cast like one more spell before it, it's just going to give you more options. And sure, green, 3 green, is a little bit difficult to pay, but it's a good enough payoff. Feral's Zealot, so when it attacks and isn't blocked, you can have it, or you can choose to have it deal 3 damage to target opponent. So it basically swings for 5 if it's not blocked. That's 25% of your opponent's life. That's, it seems insignificant, but it could win you a game. Granite Grip, an enchanted creature gets +1/+0 for each mountain that's yours and your opponent's. So in mono red or like red blue, that kind of deck, it's going to give you a good option. Seething Anger. So when you play this spell, put it into your hand instead of your graveyard as part of its effect, and it gives target creature +3/+0 until end of turn. Sure, it's a sorcery, right? So it's not really a combat trick. You can't trick your opponent by swinging in with your 1/1 and then pumping it up a bunch. But if you have a 1/1, right? Like you play a... I can't find a red 1/1 now, can I? Let's just say you play Generous Visitor turn 1, right? We'll touch on Generous Visitor first, right? So whenever you cast a spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Let's say you started turn 1 with a source that could add green and red, right? So you use it to add green, and then on turn 1, you play a mountain again. So that's +3/+0, and then it puts a +1/+1 counter on itself. So it's a 5/2, and then you use another red source that's +3/+0. So it's an 9/3, turn 2, swing for 9. Just being able to cast a spell over and over because it gets returned to hand is really good, because there's so many cards that are just when you cast a spell, something happens. So just having a repeatable spell is really good. Even though to be honest, it seems really underwhelming. Like this, if I saw this in a draft, I'd probably just, I'm good. Fever Charm. So target creature gains haste. Target creature gets +2/+0. Fever Charm deals 3 damage to target. Target, we're going to rule 0 this too. Target is just any target, right? Because it doesn't make sense for everything to have to be target this, target that, whatever. White Mane Lion. When it enters, you return a creature to its owner's hand, and it has Storm. Yep. So it also has Flash. So if you can Storm off, you could just return your opponent's board to its owner's hand, and there's nothing they can do about that. Adarkar Unicorn. So you add it's a 3-mana 2/2. You can tap it to add blue, and 1 colorless. So it basically adds enough mana to pay for itself. It's not great, but it's an option. Piety Charm. You destroy a creature. Target gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And attacking doesn't cause creatures you control to tap this turn. Gives your creatures vigilance. It's just a good option. Amru Scout. So you can pay 4 and tap it, search your library for a permanent card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. This is really good. If you have a strong permanent in your library, you know exactly what to search for. High Seas. Red spells and green spells cost 1 more to play. It's just going to slow down your opponent. Rune of Might. Enchant permanent. When it enters, you draw a card. If enchanted permanent is a creature, it gets +1/+1 and has trample. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1. So it gives +2/+2 trample, and it draws you a card for 2 mana. It's a decent enough aura. Looter Il Core has Shadow, so it can block or be blocked only by creatures with Shadow. I forget about Shadow a lot. I feel like there's probably a lot of cards that have Shadow in the flavor text that you could Sharpie out, give it Shadow. But when it deals damage to an opponent, draw a card. It's just a good way to swing in, especially because it can't really be blocked by anything else unless your opponent has something else with Shadow. So you can bump it up. Guildscorn Ward. Enchanted creature has protection from colored. So if you have something and you don't want your opponent to kill it, that's how you protect it. And then you've probably won the game from there. Wither Crown. Enchanted creature has base power 0, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose the game unless you sacrifice this creature. It's just a removal spell, but, I mean, technically your opponent could choose to lose the game, I guess, if they really wanted to. It also gives them time to react to it, I guess, if they wanted to remove Withergrasp or Wither Crown. Fertilid. So Fertilid enters with 2 +1/+1 counters. You can pay 1 and a green to make target players search their library for a land, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Here's the thing. That's a land. It's any land, right? So if I was to then, like, I don't know, search my library for Bountiful Landscape, right? I can tap it for 7 mana, use at least 2, I can use a green and a blue and a green and a blue to activate it 2 more times to search for, I guess, 2 more forests. Then I use those forests and that red, or I use 1 forest and a red, 1 forest and a red, and then search for 2 more lands. I guess search for 2 more forests, tap those, activate Fertilid 1 more time, get a forest, use the colorless and a forest, and you basically just searched out like 6 lands on 1 turn. There's a good reason you usually have to remove counters from this. Gluttonous Slug. So whenever a creature enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, and it has Menace. So your opponent's creatures will bump it, your creatures will bump it. Wings of Vilis Veil. Changeling, and target creature becomes a 4/4, gains all creature types, and gains flying. Again, we're just calling this perpetual since there's no end of turn. Bayou Groff. Ready? Devour 10. So when it enters, you can sacrifice any number of creatures, and then you put 10 +1/+1 counters on it for each creature sacrificed. That's fucking insane. Sure, it doesn't have trample, but, like, what's your opponent gonna do? Even if you don't sacrifice any creatures, it's a 2-mana 5/4. It's so good. See, like, that's a game-winning permanent right there. Rune of Protection Black. You can pay 1 white to prevent all damage to you and draw a card. This is also repeatable card draw. Warden of Evos Isle. Flying and spells you cast cost 1 less. Fat. Has Death Touch and Infect. Here's another thing you pump up to possibly win the game. Gorilla Cry. Attacking creatures can't be blocked. Doesn't say till end of turn, so this is forever. This kind of goes both ways, though. So your opponent's creatures also can't be blocked, so you better make the most of it, and you draw a card. Dawnfeather Eagle just gives your creatures +1/+1 and Vigilance. Soul Ransom just gives you can control. You enchant a creature, you control that creature, and then you can discard 2 cards to draw 2 cards. So it's just a way to draw through your library, get whatever card you need. Burn the Impure deals 3 damage to target creature, and then it deals 3 damage to that creature's controller. This is a good red removal spell, and it's just going to burn down your opponent. Viridian Emissary. When it dies, you search your library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Again, there's a couple good lands you could find. There's things you can... I think I'm going to find one of the Urza's lands, and then just black it out so it adds, like 4 mana or whatever. You know, I'm just going to make lands good. At least so that you actually want to choose lands when you're drafting. Dauntless Cathar. You pay 1 and a white to exile a creature. Yeah. Your opponent has to remove this or their board is done for. Squadron Hawk. When it enters, you may search your library for up to 3 cards, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. Insane amounts of value. Shatter Assumption. You choose one, target opponent reveals and then discards all cards. Reveals their hand and discards all card. Or, get this, target opponent reveals their hand and discards all cards. Crazy. Yeah. So it just makes your opponent discard their hand. Song of Blood. You put the top 4 cards from your library into the graveyard. For each card put into your graveyard this way, all creatures that attack this turn get +1/+0 until end of turn. So you mill 4, and then all of your attacking creatures get +4/+0. Just gonna let them swing in for big damage. Serpentine Curve. You create a 0/0 green and blue fractal. You put X counters on it, where X is 1 plus the total number of cards in exile and in graveyards. So, you play this turn 4. You have 3 cards in graveyard. Your opponent has 4 cards in graveyard. Maybe you have a couple cards in exile. You know, and it's like a 4-mana 10/10. It's just a good over-satted creature. Tetsuo Umezawa Fugitive. Just creatures you control can't be blocked. Pretty good. Psychic Mama. So, target player discards a card. If a card is discarded this way, return Psychic Mama to your hand. It's a repeatable discard spell. It's sorcery speed, so it's not busted. So your opponent has to find some way to get it out of your hand. Elven Bow. When it enters, you create a 1/1 attached to it. So it's basically a 1 mana 2/3. And when it dies, you re-equip it to something else. And last up is Rat's Feast. You remove X target cards from the game. Probably the best removal spell I've come up with, maybe, possibly. It just gives you options. Like I said before, remove X target cards from the game. That's graveyard, that's hand, that's field. They're just exiled. So, at this point, I have made about 170 cards. So I believe I'm going to do probably around 300, and then I'm going to try and do a little pretend draft, you know. I don't really, I have people to draft with, but I'm not going to record it when I actually draft with friends. I'll probably do something like, okay, so we're making 15 card packs, and then, I'll make 8 of them. I'll choose what I want from mine. I'll be like, oh, I want Bell. Bell's really good. And then I'll pass it to the next player. I'll get whatever so, another 15 card pack, whatever. Apparently this is a simulacrum. Fun fact. That's not a nosy goblin. That's a simulacrum. So, and whatever the next pack would be, I would just shuffle it and then remove the top card so that I have 14 cards to look at. And then I'd be like, probably Devout Harvest. And then I would just like keep going like that until I made a deck. And then I would draw some test hands and just either play against myself or see how these cards hold up. Because definitely there are some cards that are a little bit underpowered. There's some cards that are a bit overpowered. Like, it's just going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out when I'm done. Because I think it's really interesting. I think Sharpie Cube as a concept is really fun. You know, the fact that even if Wizards can't, like, provide us with the game we want, we'll make the game we want. I also think it's interesting how just removing, like, a couple words from a card can make it go from absolutely, like, bad to absolutely busted, or, like, not even bad sometimes, just, like, you know, Squadron Hawk going from search for 3 Squadron Hawks to search for 3 cards and put them into your hand. That's nuts. And look, we removed 1 line of text. That's it. That's what made the card go from good to busted, is 1 line of text. So I think it's really interesting. Let me know if y'all want to, like, see more. If you really don't like Sharpie Cube, tell me in the comments, alright? But this is MTG Man signing off, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.